Hi, I'm Torrey, and I'll be summarizing the concepts from Banela and Tronick's 2019 paper, Mutual Regulation and Unique Forms of Implicit Relational Knowing. This paper speaks to me as a parent, as it describes how infants and caregivers are engaged in this constant and complex dance of reciprocal dyadic engagement, attunement, co-regulation, and meaning making. The infant affects the parent just as the parent affects the infant. So it's bidirectional, not monodirectional. In my personal life, I know I impact my kids, but this paper makes me question how much my two boys have also created who my husband and I are as parents. For instance, I've sat back at the beach with a friend who has similarly rambunctious children as our kids played, screeching, splashing, and perhaps throwing some sand. We deeply felt the need to gulp in some personal relaxation time when the kids were engaged and we weren't overtly needed. A third friend, parenting a single, much quieter child, acted really differently. She inserted herself into her kids' play in a way that we honestly couldn't imagine having the energy for. And I remember being really curious how much of this difference was due to inherent parenting styles versus the needs and demands of our pretty different kids. I also noticed differences in the ways that I need to parent my two boys. I really distinctly remember having this nervous, jumpy impulse while driving with my second child to entertain him at stoplights so he didn't instantly start screaming in the back, even though he didn't need it. This was just a leftover impulse from parenting my first son when he was an infant. They had really different needs when they were little, and now as well. And this was just one example of noticing the discrepancy of how I needed to be different as a parent for them. On a micro level, Banela and Tronick's paper describe how this dance happens in mismatches and matches. So mismatches refer to the lack of attunement and engagement. So it can involve distraction, misreading signals and timing, shifts in intention, etc. Matches, on the other hand, refer to attuned engagement. During a normal interaction, experiments suggest that reparation happens as caregivers and infants figure each other out, and mismatches quickly turn into matches. This reparation happens within 2 seconds about 70% of the time, and it's a really good thing. It leads to really positive effects for the child, including trust in the caregiver, a sense of self-efficacy, so I can fix things, flexibility, complexity, and a meaningful understanding of the world. On the flip side, chronic lack of reparation has the opposite negative effect, and it increases vulnerability to future mental disorders. This chronic lack of reparation or chronic misattunement could be fueled by the caregiver's depression, anxiety, substance use, or other mental health disorders, or by high levels of parental stress. On the infant side, misattunement might be fueled by, for instance, drug exposure, as the baby has less ability to engage in the repair. Personally, knowing how important this reparation is, I'm curious about other causes of misattunement not described in the paper and how those might be mitigated. Returning to the topic of how infants affect their caregivers, how is misattunement fueled by infant factors like autism and other neurotypes? And is it possible to address these? Does the stress inflicted on caregivers by grumpy, spirited, or colicky babies decrease attunement? And how might we as a culture alleviate this stress? What about the impact of sociocultural factors like presence or lack of extended family, the prevalence of technological distractions like phones, if financial abundance or stress, and availability or lack of affordable childcare? These factors may have more impact on human development and health than we realize. Overall, this article stresses the importance of this dyadic co-regulatory dance between infant and caregiver. An infant relying on self-regulation strategy, while they will and they can, is a pretty problematic alternative, at least early on. And it emphasizes how much the infant itself does to get this need met. Babies actively work to engage their caregiver, using more and more unique actions specific to their relationship with their caregiver as they grow older, which then become, for better or for sometimes worse, interestingly ingrained into adulthood. How much do our relational quirks harken back to just what got a parent's attention when we were 10 months old? But back to the infant, they are more emotionally able and actively involved in engaging in repairing relationships than we often give them credit for. One final side note, It's really notable how jarring it is to read in this paper about just infant and mother instead of infant and caregiver. So, father, grandparent, daycare provider, other alloparents. This was written not long ago in 2019. So, why are other caregivers not recognized? And historically and across cultures, how much are mothers more involved than other caregivers? Shout out to the active, attuned, and engaged fathers out there, as well as aunts, uncles, grandparents, siblings, neighbors, and daycare workers. It really takes a village.